Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Jude.
My name is TRACY. My apologies for coming in late. I had other commitments, but I really wanted to make it here for this discussion. So my opinion of the book generally, I found it quite underwhelming. I went into the book with so much expectation. I thought I was going to read something like the Mau Mau, but the South African version. But in the course of my reading, I realized that the Mau Mau aspect that I wanted to read from this book, most of it with the formation of Umkhonto weSizwe and now them shifting to violence and guerrilla warfare. Most of this occurred when Mandela was in prison. And so he did not shed light on a lot of things that happened when he was in prison. So that is why I found the book to be underwhelming. Additionally, I recognize that Mandela is not necessarily an author or a writer. So there are aspects that I wanted to see. Like, I felt like a lot of the characters fell off and he never told us what happened to some of these people. For a moment, we lost his Justice. For a moment, we lost Justice for like quite a while. Then later on, he comes to tell us, oh, by the way, Justice is the chief now. But lucky for Justice, other characters just fell off the book and were never talked about again. But I would expect that of an author, not an autobiography is different, considering this person is not necessarily a writer. However, here are a few things that stood out to me while I was reading the book. So the first thing that Adon had mentioned was the chief's address during the initiation. From what I read in South Africa, initiation is depicted as what ushers you into manhood. And with manhood comes freedom to do whatever it is that you like. And so that is what they were celebrating in this ceremony. Manhood and by extension, freedom to do adult things, to own things, to have family and whatnot. But I liked the fact that the chief is very aware of the circumstances, although the others, I assume they were aware, they just ignored it, but he pointed it out to them that much as you're being initiated, there's not much in store for you after this. There's hardly anything you're going to achieve, being considering the current situation. So you can only achieve freedom when our whole country achieves freedom from the white man. I think that was a good wake-up call. I believe that was actually Mandela's wake-up call now to develop interest in activism in their country. The second thing was during the course of his study at Wits, when he was facing so much animosity from his colleagues there and even lecturers, I believe. And they believe that a Black person cannot necessarily master science. Our minds are not complex enough to master such kind of things, considering he was the only Black student in his faculty. And so I believe it is this belief that the Black mind cannot grasp quote unquote complex aspects that brought about the Bantu Education Act. So this is whereby they were creating syllabuses, different syllabuses for the white child, and those are different syllabus for the Black child. And as it's expected, the Black child wasn't being taught, according to them, sciences, the law and whatnot. They were being taught, I believe, hands-on skills that the highest position a Black man could achieve at that time, I believe, was a clerical job. So that was the prestige, that was the peak of a Black man's career at that time. So the education system was also fashioned in a way. It's either you become successful to become a clerk or anything lower than that. So that is what they were being trained. They were being trained for. While the rest would, of course, do any other thing that they were considered bright enough to grasp. Another thing that was of interest was the fact that in every group of Black people who are being oppressed, you will find a few people who want to appeal to the oppressors themselves. And so you find them ideally doing what it is that they think the oppressor wants. And we had actually discussed this when we were doing A Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, when we're saying most of these African elites were the weakest links during the struggle. So ideally, they're the collaborators. And much as I think they're appealing to the white, these people actually don't like them. They don't even respect them. So the respect that they want so much, eventually they don't get it. Yes. Another thing was the concept of going to jail for something that you believe in. That is not very common in our generation nowadays. I believe we don't have political systems to fight apart from Ruto anyway. But I don't know if people will go to jail for believing he's a bad leader. Yeah, there are not many Ian Njoroges at this moment. But I was thinking, yes, that's fine. You're going to jail for what you believe. Mandela himself believed that he could not sit at peace when his country people were suffering. But for you to deliver freedom to your country people, it's at the expense of those who are closest to you, and that is your family. When he's in prison, when his mother dies, he starts regretting, and he starts doubting if indeed this is the right path that he had chosen. Because in hindsight, he thought maybe if he hadn't gone to politics, he would have taken better care of his mom, of his family, and whatnot. So I believe the people who bear the brunt of his liberation struggles are the families of these freedom fighters. But I also noted that Mandela, much as he was doing all that liberation struggle, he had a support system in his family. Not much support in his first wife, but his second wife was ideally him in the opposite gender. So I think her support made his time during the struggle much easier because she had the same ideology as him. The mother wasn't necessarily giving him a hard time. She was barely interested in what her son was doing. So I think, and then the friends that he had around, the likes of Oliver Tambo and Walter Sisulu, I think they did a good job holding him down during such times. And then another thing that I noted was the Indians, the struggle of the Indians, and the fact that they wanted to be incorporated in the African struggle. So there's the African struggle and the Indian struggle. And from my reading of the book, the Indians were not oppressed as the Africans were, that they had certain privileges. So much as they were both oppressed, it was not with the same intensity. And so I understood Mandela when he was very wary of including these people in ANC, because at the end of the day, they're not really fighting for the same thing. They are fighting for the same cause, but the Indians have different priorities at that time. And so I was thinking of this idea of the African versus the Indian struggle and suffering. And I was equating it to, or like comparing it to African feminism versus American European feminism. So I came to notice recently that feminism as an idea for empowering of women is different in Africa and in Europe. So the feminists in Europe wanted to vote. That was most of their grievances. But you find that the feminists in Africa were literally fighting for basic rights, you know. And so at the end of the day, it is all in the umbrella of feminism, but we are all fighting for different things. And the moment you're fighting for different things in the same umbrella, we can't take the same tactics, the same approaches to this problem. So it is hard for both of you to combine into one force, move together, since your priorities are different. The moment your priorities are different, there will be mistrust. Other people will not put in enough effort. That's why Mandela felt like the Indians were just joyriding on the ANC's struggle. So that is something that I found interesting. The other thing was the legitimizing of cruel practices through the law. As I was reading the book, I was wondering, in the face of all this oppression, how come the revolution didn't come in any earlier? So does that mean everyone was okay with whatever the white people were doing, the land regulations, the policies that were put in place, the pass laws and whatever? Were they okay with these things in the first place? But there's also the concept, the tactic that the oppressors use, where all these cruel laws are they're put in law. So they're using the law to justify the cruel things that they're doing to people. That is why you find in Germany during the World War, when Hitler found a way to legalize, what is it called? I'm forgetting the term. I can't find it. But when Hitler was working on laws to find a way to kill the Jews without raising much outrage from the people. So he was using the law to justify whatever he was doing. And I think this is one of the things that really worked in the benefit and against us as Africans, since these are now codified laws that there's not really much they can do against it. Yeah. So another thing that I learned during the Rivonia trial, that is actually one of the things I was looking forward to in the book. So during the Rivonia trial, I learned a few legal tactics, I'd say. so yeah. So like off the top of my head, when you're cross-examining someone and you find points to discredit them. I remember when the defense counsel was examining, I believe, an officer of the government, and he was reading to him communist quotes and asking him, do you think this is communist? And the professor, I believe, said, yes, it is. And then he later told him, these are actually your own words that you wrote in whatever book. So you use such things to discredit a witness. And then I believe whatever it is the professor said after that, the judge didn't even take notice of it. So at that point, you're not a credible witness. So that is a tactic I learned. And then another thing was the government moving Nelson's, I think it was a trial. So they moved the trial from Johannesburg to, I don't remember which town it is, to Pretoria. And the reason was to separate the prisoners from their natural supporters. So during the trials that were in Johannesburg, a lot of people showed up to support the group Nelson. A lot of people showed up to support, and then the government realized that they were not able to hold these trials, being that these trials were not even fair in the first place. So what they did was take them to Victoria, where ANC did not have much supporters. So I believe it is also to kill the spirit of the prisoners. From the moment no one shows up in the audience gallery, you start to believe that people no longer trust the ANC to lead them out of the struggle. So I think I got both sides of the coin. If I'm a prosecutor, I take you to Mombasa or wherever, and then from the defense counsel, yeah, the cross-examination goes hard. And then one of the last points, something else was the insistence on nonviolence up to the late 1960s. Honestly, I did not understand the essence of insisting on nonviolence for over 3 decades, because the ANC was formed as early as the 1920s. The ANC existed, and they waited until the 1960s to realize that nonviolence was not going to get them freedom. I think that was very unwise, because you are relying on a system that time and time again has proven to be ineffective. And even at this point, when they just decided to use guerrilla warfare and form on counter procedures, they actually did it with so much doubt. Like, they still wanted nonviolence. The executive still wanted nonviolence. Nelson had to go behind the back to create strategies to form on counter procedures. So I think that was not foolish. I don't want to call it foolish. But I think reliance on a system that has proven not to work, and considering the times during the struggle, was wastage of time. I believe if they had adopted violent systems earlier, South Africa wouldn't have waited till 1980s to get independence. Because at the time they were insisting on nonviolence, Kenya was way ahead of them. I believe in 1952, when we were having our state of emergency, they were still insisting on nonviolence. And so the other African countries gained some pace ahead of South Africa. But yeah, so that is why when we were reading Wretched of the Earth and we were having the discussion, was violence the only means to get independence? I believe it is. This affirmed my position that they should have used violence. The violence I wanted to see, I didn't even see, because it happened when he was in prison and he didn't really give us much detail of what happened during the 27 years. I believe it is in the 27 years that the pace towards liberalizing the struggle, it picked up, and finally to a point that he got released and became president. Something else notable was the use of Kenya as a benchmark for guerrilla warfare. I felt very proud, very proud of our country to have been one of Nelson Mandela's inspirations to form on counter procedures. Yes, something else that I learned was that a good leader must be well read. A good leader must be well read. It's like all the answers that you're looking for are in the books. Even information of conflict, he had to read so much on guerrilla warfare. I believe some of the material was even seized and used against him as evidence. So in the end, you cannot read, because he was reading books like Mao Japanese or Chinese, yeah, such kind. What? Yeah, so to be a good leader, you have to read and to set up effective systems. You have to do so much research and look at people who've done it before, how they did it, how it worked, for it to be effective in your country. Yes, that is all I wanted to say about. Oh, lastly, something else was the power of persuasion. So there's a time Nelson was trying to argue, I think, why they should use guerrilla warfare. And he genuinely had very valid points, but someone else in ANC was opposing him. And he simply won just because of the fact that he was more persuasive. He was better with words compared to Nelson, even though his idea was rational. And I felt annoyed by this. I'd say I detest the whole idea of being persuasive to get the point across. I do not like that I have to say what convince you. I like giving people facts. I think this will work because of 1, 2, 3. I give you precedence, I give facts. Why do you need to use sweet words to convince you when you can? I believe you can see the sense. So in any event that you do not do what I wanted you to do, even though I've given you very rational facts and precedents, I would genuinely consider or genuinely think that you are a little bit less sensible. Yeah, anyway, that's just an A or B in the book. Thank you.